Do you remember when you were younger, perhaps visiting your grandma and she had wild roses in her yard? I do. They were pink ones and red ones, and how we wanted to get in there as kids and pick a little bouquet, perhaps for our moms. Maybe it was around Mother's Day, who knows? But we were told not to go in there because there were thorns there, prickly little surprises for unsuspecting, curious visitors. Well, we found that out that the pretty roses had thorns to go along with them. Now that we're grown up, we understand that concept. We understand you can't have a mountaintop experience without going through some valleys. You can't have sunshine without rain or daylight without night. That's just the way God created this beautiful world of ours, and we enjoy it just the way it is. Those blossoms in Grandma's yard were very welcoming. They were warm, they were inviting, and they just had just added a wonderful touch to her yard. I'm going to tell you a short little story about a lady that I heard about that seemed to have a whole rose garden, not just in her yard, but in her life. It just looked from the curb that she had a rose garden of a life. And there was a song a few decades ago called "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden." So that's really what God tells us in His Word, and we'll touch on that a little bit later when we're finished this short story. She was beautiful enough to be a movie star. She lived a rather obscure life in a small town. Having married young, she had two equally attractive daughters. But before the girls were grown, her husband passed, leaving her to raise them on her own. Her daughters were not yet old enough to marry or have children of their own when they were taken from her in a tragic accident. She would later remarry, only to become a widow once more. So she was left with not a rose garden, that's for sure. Shortly after the loss of her second husband, she reflected on the blessings evident in her life and how still she has plenty to be thankful for, despite her losses. What a lady! What an inspiration to us. She is more whole in her journey of brokenness than many who haven't suffered the extent of losses that she has. She may have been handed a rose garden in life, but those roses were quickly taken from her one at a time. But she chose, even though this rose garden was no longer a rose garden, she chose to be grateful for the solitary roses she was able to admire or attain along the way. As prickly as those roses may have been at times, she kept them to her heart, close to her heart, while they were hers to hold. I asked myself this question earlier, and maybe you want to ask yourself the same question. What unique and precious roses have we held on to along the way? What unique and precious roses have we not held on to along the way because perhaps they had prickly thorns on them, or perhaps we were looking for the entire rose garden? If you can resonate with that, I want to assure you that I can as well. Let's begin now, wherever we are, to appreciate the unique blessings, or roses, if you will, along the journey of life, because we will never know how long they will be ours to treasure, because soon they may become just a memory. God promises to be with us, regardless of whether we find ourselves in an entire rose garden, holding a single rose, or left entirely empty-handed without any roses left. He promises to never leave us nor forsake us, regardless, if we put our hope and faith in Him to be our comfort. Psalm 23 says, Lord, even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. Wow. I just want to share with you briefly some thoughts about life being compared to a rose garden. We need to appreciate, they always say, stop and smell the roses, for one thing. And it's a cliche, but it's true. Because we never know how long we'll have the roses to enjoy. So whether it's a single rose, let's appreciate the ones that we meet along the way. And if we have roses that are mere memories, let's remember the sweetness of the memories in those roses. And let's remember that however we find ourselves, God is with us. And who knows when we might happen along another rose or another rose garden. So whatever state we find ourselves, the Lord will be with us. But I just wanted to liken life to a bed of roses, how sometimes we have the whole bed of roses, sometimes a solitary rose, other times we don't have anything left. We're sometimes completely broken. We don't see any beauty around us. But if we hang on to the Lord and trust Him, we may just see some more roses come into life. And I just want to encourage you with those words, those humble thoughts this morning. And I hope that you can relate, resonate, and we'll catch up with you next time. Bye-bye.